Let's see if we can get this set up. And it looks right. Let's see if we can get this to go down just a tiny bit. I think so. Not 100%, but I think that we're live. So, let's see here. Yeah, 3D, okay. So, welcome to whomever. Sorry. Again, if you have followed me for the last couple of weeks or so, you know that I'm not terribly good at this kind of stuff. So, technology and I don't usually get along all that well. We sometimes have a symbiotic relationship. Otherwise, technology and I don't usually go well. I'm still kind of old school. I do, like, whenever I build stuff, I actually still use hand tools on a bunch of things, too. So I'm just kind of that way. So we'll see here how many folks will show up for everything. I'm probably only going to be here. I'm not feeling super hot, so I'm probably only going to be here about an hour, maybe a little over. So don't think that I don't know that I'm going to be able to do one of those things where I'm here for 2 hours or what it was like last Saturday. So that might have been a bit much. Something that I kind of thought about today, and I was going to lead off with. I don't know how I found this. It just came across FYP, and it was this dude who was talking about the idea of IQ. Welcome to all people. I'm doing well, by the way. Thank you very much. I hope everybody else is doing well who's joining me on this. But he was talking about the idea of IQ. So there was this. I don't remember the name of the experiment that was being done, but it was in Southern California at Stanford University, and they were doing a IQ test of something like 250,000 people, right? And some of you probably saw the video that I just recently posted. It was a stitch, right? Thank you very much. I'm glad to have you with me. But yeah, they did this study, right, where it was 250,000 students, young people, where they tested, did the IQ test thing. And the theory being that, okay, if we follow these kids through their whole progression from when they're kids to when they're adults, then the theory is that, okay, if it's all about IQ, if IQ is the end all, then that means the more intelligent students who were like a couple standard deviations above the mean would be more successful in their lifetime. And what they found out was that actually wasn't the case. It was the kids that were really successful, even though they were still tracking the kids with the higher IQs, they found that, well, their parents were fairly wealthy and well connected politically, and so of course those kids were more successful. And of course, so the question was, what happened to the kids that scored really high on those IQ tests, but that came from poor households, right? Because those are the ones that we're curious about, like what happened to those guys, right? Where are the rags to riches stories? And of course, the researcher, and I cannot for the life of me remember his name. I'm sorry, it was at Stanford University though. But they found out that basically all those kids that scored really high on IQ tests back in the day, even as little kids, when they became adults, they still weren't very successful. They still didn't, even though they had genius level IQs, right? These are kids with 140 plus IQs, but yet they just couldn't. They couldn't make it. Well, yeah. And of course, the problem is that it isn't because it was IQ. So where I'm going with all that was that if you saw that video, that stitch that I did with that professor was just asking the question of okay, so my scientific instincts kick in, and the first thing I ask is, okay, so what happened to all the students who scored lower in the system, right, and lower on IQ, but they also came from fairly wealthy families? What happened to those kids? Were they super successful? Did they get basically shoved through Harvard or some other institution, given a degree because their parents bought a building for the school, and they were given credentials and then unleashed on an unsuspecting population who thought that they were intelligent, and they're really not. They're just a bunch of, a bunch of plebs like the rest of us for the most part, but they have all these credentials from these prestigious sounding universities, but they're just as dumb as a bag of hammers, like most of the people in investment banking. So, like, I mean, this is a, we talking about coordinated debt default. Look, I'll you know what? Let me pause that scroll real quickly, just so I can come back to that. Yes, I will bring that up. I did see your video on that, by the way. I just haven't had a chance to actually go into that. I've been a bit busy the last few days. Anyway, so that was a question that I brought up. What are your thoughts on that? On the whole idea behind? Let me just pop that right there. There we go. It's so that way I don't have to look at the number counter. It's not because I get nervous or anything, as I mentioned before. It's just a distraction for me. Anyway, so what are your thoughts on the whole idea? Because my suspicion is that, and this is just my take on the whole IQ thing in general, and this is why I'm not a believer in IQ science. I don't really trust the IQ idea of IQ science. IQ science to me is effectively a pseudo-discipline, and I think a lot of it has to do more with just kind of running cover for wanting to be able to hire, or being able to put people who are part of the bloodline, so to speak, the bloodlines that we don't talk about, and I don't mean, by the way, I'm not talking about a religion or anything either, just before you guys go run off half-cocked. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, the so-called ruling elite people, which are all races, colors, backgrounds, etc. They are all the people that are willing to agree to all these crazy rules that that most of us out here in the real world would never agree to. We would never pledge our so-called bloodline for some kind of low interest rate loan or something like that. Speaking of, okay, so to talk about this idea of the coordinated debt default, if I understand correctly what you're talking about, if I understand this, yes, this does work on an individual level. However, there is another problem with coordinated debt default that we need to talk about, okay? And that is that most people are able to get away with it. Hey, myself, lots of us are able to get away with that on an individual level. If large numbers of people do that, I don't know that it will have the effect that you're thinking. Let me explain why. First of all, they control the printing press. They can always it's not going to be the damage that you think. In other words, let's say that 20 million people decided to just straight up default. Well, first of all, they're going to anyway. There's going to be upwards of probably 20 million people that are going to default on debt, categorically. Just because of the way things are, right? I mean, look at how many people aren't making their credit card payments. Look at the amount of repos that we're getting. And by the way, yes, you're correct. You are. You're 100% correct on this. On an individual level, it does work until they start to try and make an example out of people. And that would be coming. If enough people started doing that, my thought on that is that a lot of these banks will start to try and look for every legal avenue they can to try and make an example of it. This is the Wesley Snipes thing, right? Like the IRS is not going to go broke over Wesley Snipes. What did he owe them? What did they claim he owed him? They claimed he owed him something like $20 million or something like that. Dude, the country's not going to win hawk on that. So in the time that it took me to save Wesley Snipes' name, this country's already burned through $20 million. So no, the country's not going to go into hawk over that. That's the part that gets forgotten, is that they control the dollars, they control the dollar printing, and unfortunately, this is the angle that I always come at from this. Unfortunately, as long as people are willing to keep accepting dollars, it will stay alive. The dollar will always stay alive as long as people are willing to keep accepting it. And you can say, well, we're not going to accept dollars anymore, right? That's the idea. That's the argument. Let's say that 50 million Americans decided not to. They will replace you with 50 million migrants that will. And don't think for a second they won't, because look at what's going on even currently, right? We can do deportations and so on. Like, that remains to be seen. We have yet to see that. And of course, the type of deportations that you might be thinking, I think that Americans are not going to see the type of deportations where you're not going to see Hollywood celebrities running to Home Depot to buy lawnmowers. I don't see that happening. I mean, not to put too fine a point on that, but I don't see a bunch of, Hollywood, liberal elite douchebags like Whoopi Goldberg running to the Home Depot and then trying to figure out, what type of mixed fuel her leaf blower takes, right? So that she can do her lawn. I don't see that happening. I don't see the type of mass deportations that Americans think they're going to get. I don't think those are going to happen. Just my personal take on that. So I hope that kind of answered your question. I'll continue to scroll and stuff as best I can. Remember, I'm doing this on my own here, so I was trying to figure out how to set up a moderator, and I have yet to. We weren't able to figure it out, so I'll figure it out at some point. Maybe by next Saturday I'll figure it out if I decide to do it on one of these next Saturday. We'll see if I haven't completely just said that's it. I've had enough of this. Let me guess. Internet depressed. I don't know. I'm sorry, I missed that one. My bad. Let's see here. Welcome to everybody, by the way. And by the way, I don't ignore if you guys are like giving like little gifts and everything, for starters, I don't know what a lot of those are. I'm still learning this. So while I appreciate gifts and everything, and while I don't know how to really, use them or do anything with them. So I'm trying to do the best I can with some of this stuff. I am trying to learn it. Dude, I love your stuff. Thank you very much. Well, no, thank you. Thank you for being willing to listen to me. Like I said, I consider myself pretty boring, but how's it going? Love your insightful content. Thank you very much. Always very nice to hear a compliment. Love your hair. Yeah, I know. In fact, there was that professor I was talking about in that first little preamble and stuff. I told him, I said, dude, I love the hair, because he had even bigger hair than I had too. Let's see here. I don't mind if I talk about. Yeah, that's what I mean. That's the thing, is that as far as debt default, I get the idea of what you're talking about. I really do, and I think that if you could get every American to agree to that, and then simultaneously close the borders and not allow not only illegal immigration but legal immigration too, like actually shut the borders, like for real, like say maybe just a 5-year moratorium. That's all it would take. It would only take 5 years. It'd be, and the bank, there would be a bloodbath in real estate. Real estate would collapse. The stock market would collapse. It'd be the most glorious thing ever. There'd be panic and chaos everywhere, destruction, disorder, chaos, all that environment that I actually thrive in that. In case you didn't notice, my hair is set up for that. We need to just repent, the Lord Savior us, not die for. Well, yeah, possibly. I mean, assuming he was actually God. That's not to, by the way, diminish any of the teachings. Don't misunderstand me and stuff. Even, by the way, let's be real here. Even as an atheist, even if Jesus was nobody, even if he was a total nobody, right? The fact that people are still talking about him some 2,000 odd years later, that's one hell of an individual if you think about it, right? I mean, let's say he was some total nobody carpenter that, that was the bastard child of some 15-year-old girl or something like that. Well, that's the fact that we're still talking about him 2,000 odd years later is actually rather impressive. So one has to stand in awe of that. That by itself would be almost miraculous as far as I'm concerned. Let's see here. Nephew was misinformed about IQ from racial stand. Yeah, so and the thing is that really quick, I'm not certain on the whole race and IQ thing. I have heard some pretty good arguments on both sides. I'm still of the mind in general that IQ. Holy shit, that's hot. I'm still of the mind that that I consider it kind of a pseudoscience. There, I'll be growing my taste buds back this week. So that's what I got going on this week anyway. Printing press requires taxes. Just a hyperfluid. Not really, because if you're just conjuring the money and you're feeding it on the back end to, say, for example, all these mega companies, what's the mechanism for that? If you print money from nothing and you need to funnel it to a bunch of these companies, what you would do is you would just print it out of the country, or you would conjure it out of the country. It's not actually printing in terms of physical dollars. It's all digital. It just goes through a few different shell corporations offshore, and then it shows up as a group of opaque investors or a hedge fund or something that starts investing heavily in these companies to prop up to prop up their the stock price. Because as we all know, look, let's be real here. Let's talk like right down to earth. Okay, we all know that when we go into most stores right now, pay attention, all of you, right? Just all the new people. When you walk into a store, thank you very much, Andy. When you walk into a store, we know in most cases when we look at a product that product that we're seeing, the company that manufactured the product is no longer in the business of making a good product, right? That's pretty objective now. They're in the business of making sure that the next quarter's, analyst predictions, meet the market expectations. That's what they're after. So for example, let's say that you're looking at a tire company. Most of the people that run those tire companies, right, the suits, right? The suits are not in the tire business anymore. They're in the make next quarter look good business. That's it. They're in the make next quarter look like meet analyst expectations. So if that's all that they're focused on, which is usually the case with a lot of modern suits in these institutions, these businesses, then yeah, I mean that's been the problem, is that that's all anybody cares about. They don't really care about the actual product. So as far as them inflating the currency, how do you do it without taxes? You would just funnel it into these companies, and then look at these. In other words, it's just like there was a short video I pointed out. It's how disinflation works. Disinflation is you get poor. Everybody out there gets poorer. You can't figure out why it is. You're making more dollars you've ever made, going backwards faster than you've ever gone. But look at that stock market. The Dow is like 51,000, record breaking. Now, of course, the omnibus spending bill we just signed in March, that hasn't happened yet, is going to be probably $4.5 trillion in addition to the 36 trillion we just turned yesterday. This is the kind of craziness, and that'll keep the government open for 8 months. This is the kind of craziness that's going on. So yeah, none of the fundamentals make any real sense anymore, unfortunately. I hope I answered that. I think I did. What is OPM? OPM, just so that way TikTok is very clear that I didn't say the other word. I said OPM, those letters. That means other people's money. That's usually what OPM typically means. Let's see here. I hope they try to make example out of me. Yeah, I know, kidding. Well, that's just it. And maybe they do, maybe they don't. Right? It's usually going to be somebody high profile, which is typically how that kind of thing works, right? Let's be real here. The average person watching this video, you, me, anybody who are just average plebs out here, we're just run-of-the-mill, blue-collar, douchebags out here doing our thing. We're not even on their radar. All they look for, they cherry-pick. They find someone who's slightly high profile. That way, when they torpedo that, right, it's a high-value target. They torpedo that guy or that girl. Maybe it's some influencer, right, that's got 1 million followers, 2 million followers. They torpedo them. And that's how, then their 1 million followers go, oh my gosh. It's the same thing that Vlad the Impaler. I'm not sure I can talk a lot about Vlad the Impaler, Count Dracula. I'm not sure if TikTok will allow me to have that discussion because most of it is banned subject matter. But that's exactly what he did, was just made example after example after example, and eventually scared people off. He broke the armies because that's the same thing. It's just they just learn from the Art of War, Sun Tzu, etc. So we need currency. What about small mustache man? The currency he used. Okay, so the challenge with Mustache Guy. Let's have an actual academic discussion about this, because whether I have my disagreements with certainly with some of the tactics, but let's actually have that intellectual discussion, right? The currency that they used, with the idea was, okay, we're going to use back it by the labor of the people. Again, as soon as you use the word backed, you've automatically lost the game, because now you're now relying on somebody. Now, let's say that you actually had a leader that truly kept the currency from inflating, right? And it works great as long as that leader is still in power. As soon as that leader's not in power, you know how this thing works, right? The next guy is usually not better, right? This is why, of course, and we've talked about this in the past, but this is why you can count, I think, on one or two hands the amount of so-called benevolent dictators or benevolent kings or philosopher kings that have existed out throughout all of human history. It's rare, right? It's rare that we run into a Louis XIV, right? That's rare. It's why we remember guys like Louis XIV, is because they're rare. History is littered with all of the rest of them, right? These horrible despots that were, maybe they did a couple of things right here and there, but they got a lot more wrong than they got right, because they were trying to do the benevolent dictator thing, as opposed to trying to really back off as much as possible from their people, right? And because the freer people are, right, the more productive they're going to be, and the happier they will be in general, as long as you train them to be free. We'll come back to that conversation. But you have to train people to be free. You can't just say, okay, yeah, here, you're now free. What does that mean to someone who's been enslaved their whole life, right? I mean, seriously. Let's be real here. I asked that question on another platform today, the site formerly known as Burnside. I asked the question, can slaves be free anymore nowadays? And I get the consensus of most people, or at least most people that follow my work, is 90% cannot. They're incapable of doing that. Well, yeah, it's a possibility. Let's see here. Caught you live finally. Welcome. Let me see here if we got judge, jury, and executioner. I'm not sure what we're talking about there. Can you talk about the ramifications? Mass deportations coming now. Yes. Okay, so if you want to have that discussion about mass deportations that are coming, the question, we have to start by defining what our terms of what do we mean by mass deportations. Mass deportations, if you're talking about there's usually in what most people's mind is everybody here illegally, and everybody who's come here illegally over the last 10 years. Let's be real here. This has been going on for some time. This is not a new phenomenon. But let's just say even the last 5 years. Fair enough? What most people have in their mind is, okay, they're all going to be rounded up and then shoved across the border. That's not going to happen realistically. As much as we might want that, particularly the American working class. The American working class would love to see that, because then their wages would go up, right? Their wages would 3 and 4x. They would go way up, right? And necessary, given the amount of inflation we've seen. If wages were to triple tomorrow, if your wages, whoever you are, I don't care who you are, if your wages tripled tomorrow, right? Your lifestyle would absorb it like a sponge. It'd be instant, right? Because everything has gone up in price. What most people would do is they pay down all their debt. They'd start actually paying a few things off, maybe, and then start savings and everything, right? That's what most of us would end up doing. Well, again, it's I'm convinced they don't want people to do that. But aside from that, let's assume for a second that they did want that. That's what would end up happening. I don't think we're going to see the type of deportations that are going to happen the way that it's talked about. The first one is going to be the so-called criminal gang affiliated illegals. They're going to be deported first. Okay, well, what does that even mean? First of all, no one will define what a gang is. Nobody will define what a gang. They just won't, because if they do, then especially legally, if that's actually defined, then we all know what that definition would look like. Oh, it's a group of guys and they all have weapons and they all wear the same colors. You just described every military. You just described every police department. You see that? And we all know that obvious problem. Do I think that they're going to do the big sweeping thing? No, I don't think so. I think they're going to go after a few of the so-called criminals, the people that are actually causing a bunch of high-profile problems. Do I think they're going to go in and start raiding all these employers and getting rid of all their cheap labor? No, I really don't. I do not think that's going to happen. I think that what's going to end up happening is very likely a bunch of work visas are going to be issued, a whole bunch of immediate injunctions. And I said this a long time ago. I predicted this, 6 months ago. I wrote an article on this where I predicted this whole thing, where it's like, I think what's going to end up happening is that the new incoming administration is going to do the inauguration speech. And then after that inauguration speech, they're going to set to like, okay, well, now let's do these mass deportations. And then like 5 or 6 obscure judges all over the country are going to start putting injunctions on everything. And the incoming administration is not going to, he is way too law and order for that. He's not going to go in there and start saying, okay, that's it. We're getting rid of these judges. We're firing these people. He's not going to sick Elon on them and say, okay, that's it. You guys are all fired. That's not going to happen. It practically takes an act of Congress to get rid of federal judges. I mean, it really takes a lot to get rid of these people. So I don't think that that's going to happen. It'll have to be. It'll get tied up in the courts, right? As it did last time, it'll get tied up. And in the meantime, there's going to be a whole bunch of filings for work visas and emergency visas and the what do they call that? The asylum seeking. And there's just going to be tons and tons and tons of that. And just like it's already been, I would like to see it as someone who works in the blue collar world. On 2 sectors. I compete with this, by the way. So, I mean, I'm saying this to my own detriment, right? Because I watch this every day in my respective fields, both of them, that are getting flooded with just enormous amounts of heavy-duty competition. And it's not the competition's the problem. So for my loser-tardians out there, I don't have a problem with competition. I have a problem with subsidized competition. That's my problem. If, just like I've pointed out on many occasions, let's say that an American male, for you American men, right? How many of you have 5 kids? Probably not many of you. But let's say you had 5 kids, right? How much money do you need to make to support 5 kids? It's quite a bit, right? I mean, it's like a lot of money to support 5 kids, is it not? Well, okay, so what if you're subsidized? Well, then it doesn't take as much money then, does it? Not on paper anyway, because you're subsidized on the back end of that. Well, if that's what's happening with quite a few of the migrants or illegals or whatever you want to call them, like, dude, how do you compete with that in the job world? Right? I mean, of course, it's sort of like the boomer thing, right? The boomer thing goes like this. You walk into a truck stop somewhere. I'll use something I'm familiar with. I walk into a truck stop in the middle of nowhere, right? There's just nothing around there except for this giant truck stop. I go in there, go to the bathroom, grab some water and what have you, and I go check out. And it's an elderly person working behind the counter, right? Like a boomer. Well, why can she afford to work there or he can afford to work there? Because all their stuff's all paid off, right? Their house is paid off, their cars are paid off. Like, they don't really have a whole heck of a lot of debt anymore. And yeah, so they can afford to take those jobs for $15-20 an hour. Anybody else, there's no way they could live there, right? Unless they already had a house, unless they were already pretty well established. And it's just common sense. I hope that answers your question as far as the mass migration problem and the deportations. But if you have anything more specific on this, you can throw it out there. Money lending interest usury. Yeah, it is. I did a video on usury actually, on the idea of usury, fiat currency. So. And my issue isn't with lending money. I mean, for example, you can lend money, and you can lend it even with interest, but it has to be actual money. It can't be something you've conjured from nothing. By definition, if you're lending something out with interest that you've printed from nothing, did you lend anything? Do you have any actual risk? Do you have any risk of loss? If the answer is no, then you didn't really lend anything, and no, that's the definition of usury as far as I'm concerned. Any interest, even if you charged them a penny of interest, like, it's not worth it. That would be considered usury to me, because you've conjured it from nothing. You have no risk of loss. Interest rates come about based upon the idea that, like, if you spent 6 years in a gold mine, you're gold mining, you've been digging out gold and smelting it and stacking little gold discs, little yellow metal discs, and you have a lot of actual work. You've paid the price on the front end to stack all your gold. I'm giving this as an example, okay? Because people understand the idea of gold. But anyway, you do something like that. If you lend it out to somebody, you do have a bit of risk as to whether or not they're going to pay you back, right? So therefore, you're entitled to a tiny amount of interest. Now, what that is, I'm up for debate on that. But there is something to be said that, like, well, okay, if you're taking a risk, then there has to be a reward. Otherwise, why would you take the risk? You wouldn't. You would never take the risk, right? You would just say, no, I can't lend any money because I can't make money. You get the idea. So it's an unnecessary risk. Ask any truck driver; they'll tell you the same thing. Ask however many truck drivers, when they take these loads, right, for these ridiculous, $1.50 a mile nonsense rates, right, and they'll all tell you, yeah, the risk is not. The amount of risk that you take to deliver that load is ridiculous for the amount of money you don't make. You're making basically like $8 an hour by the time it's all said and done. So. And you lived in a little box for your troubles too, and you paid $40 a meal at a truck stop. So that would be how I would look at that. Let's see here. Greek cigarette monopoly, black, Jeffrey Epstein, Diddy. Yeah, that would be how I would see that. That's been my position. I don't disagree with that. It's not a topic I can really, I guess, bring up on on TikTok too much, just because of the way that the algorithms are set up and because you can't say certain words. But yeah, I mean the island activity, which is what I refer to it as. We all pretty much know what was going on with that. My biggest problem actually isn't the whole. It's bad enough if it's just a bunch of celebrities and so on. Like that's bad enough. That's bad enough. My problem is how many Pentagon officials, how many sitting judges were at those island parties, right? Like people that actually can change the course of the country based on some landmark decision that comes down from the bench. How many of those people are actually compromised? That's a much bigger problem to me. How many sitting generals, colonels, right? How many of them are involved in that? How officers in general, right, that are part of the military, how many of them are blackmailed to that point? Like that's an even bigger concern. That really is a major, major, major concern because then nothing will ever change. It guarantees nothing changes. Guarantees that. Hold on. Let's see here. What is orange internet money? Always you're talking about it. That would be Bitcoin. That is what orange internet money is. And I say it that way only because of spam and bots. Because when you say the actual B word, you get a whole bunch of spam. You get a whole bunch of stuff that fills your inbox of like, hey, come to my new crypto seminar, blah, 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 give us money. And that's what ends up happening. I don't think it's 75% actually, because 75% would be, what is that? That would be like over 15 million coin, and that is not true. See, banks hate saving. They do, yeah. It's because it's not just banks. I mean, it's just business in general. Like if you're saving money for something, what are you doing? You're not spending it, right? So if you're not spending money, then you're slowing the economy down. Right? Remember, what is the economy? The economy is just people. That's all an economy is. It's just people engaged in commerce. Well, if everybody is saving and nobody's spending, right? Well, then, and if you're a business owner, you need people to buy stuff, right? Like this is just, put yourself in the business owner position. You own a little store somewhere. Let's assume you own some land. God forbid that happened in this country, as an individual business owner, and then you put a building on it, and then you start selling a product. I don't know, you sell tires, okay? And so you have a little tire store. You need people to be buying tires from you in order to stay in business. You don't want them, not buying tires. You want them buying tires so that you can make a living, right? Let's see here. Government control, yeah, they are. There's lots of puppets out there. $35 to GP. Immigrants generate 35, I'm guessing billion. I'm guessing because it just says $35. That's probably more than that. $35 billion GDP. Even so, it doesn't matter. Even if that were the case, it's like, it's just like when I see these people that say like, oh, well, if we deport all the illegals, then that means your grocery bill is gonna double. Your terms are acceptable. I'll take it. Because if my wages triple or quadruple, I'll take it. I understand the math on that a bit better. I'm not saying nobody else understands the math, but dude, that your terms are acceptable to ask most of the blue collar world, I will take an increase in food prices because, I can decide to not go to restaurants. But I do need to have the wages for everything else going up. You see the dollar collapsing? No, I don't. I don't see the dollar collapsing anytime soon. And let me explain to you why that is briefly. I don't want to tear into it because I did a whole video. I've done like 3 videos on that now. If you go back and you scroll back through my my page on TikTok, you'll see I've done like, none of them are clearly titled. I hate naming stuff, so I just name it whatever random stuff pops into my head. But yeah, if you go back, and I'm terrible at cataloging stuff, but yeah, the dollar is not probably going to collapse. The reason it probably won't collapse is because people keep accepting it. That's all it is. And the idea, of course, of the orange internet money guys, and some of the more advanced guys seem to understand what I mean when I talk about this kind of stuff. But the problem, of course, is that as soon as you have to trade in your orange internet money for dollars, you keep it alive. You give it more power. It really is truly the biggest problem. If you look at when the South, the southern states in the U.S., right, 1861, they walked out and said, that's it, we don't want to be part of the U.S. They didn't say we want to conquer the North. No. They said we want to leave. Okay? It doesn't make any difference where they left. That means nothing. They wanted to leave. And the first thing they did was create their own currency. And that was the cardinal sin right there. They created a currency, and that was the end of it. That was then the North had to go conquer them, because otherwise the South would have been able to export their inflation to the North. And that would have crushed the North, because the South was and still is largely the engine of production of the U.S. So yeah, the currency is a big deal. Remember, dollar hegemony is the biggest concern. And that's why it didn't really make any difference which one of the clowns you voted for. When it comes to the dollar, it didn't make any difference. Whether it was a koala or the orange man, it doesn't matter, okay? They're both shills for the dollar. They have to try and maintain dollar hegemony. I've said this before. Make America great is not the same as make Americans great. Big difference. To make things great for Americans, you need to let the dollar collapse and take all of this malinvestment with it. This is your straight Ron Paul speech, right? They ejected Ron Paul instantly. As soon as the campaign was over, man, it's like, they shoved him out of a moving car and said, no, we don't want to have that Ron Paul stuff around here, because then you're going to talk about closing things down. I just saw today, like this madness of government accountability, or government efficiency. I don't know, Doge or whatever it is, Department of Government Efficiency. Okay, so. And they're hiring people. So we need to hire a bunch of people to fire a bunch of people. That just defies commentary. I don't even know where to go with that idea. So, no, you didn't need to hire anybody. And you certainly didn't need to create a bureaucracy for this. Even though it's a ceremonial bureaucracy, you didn't need to do any of that. It's pretty easy to just shut down a bunch of alphabet agencies that we don't need. There are something like 440 or something like that, 460 alphabet agencies. We need like maybe 3. The rest of them can just be completely shut down and everybody fired. But that'll create unemployment. I don't care. You know what? There's a whole bunch of fields of crops that need to be picked. And there's a whole bunch of government workers that are freshly unemployed. Wow, it's almost like it was meant to be. Well, they won't do that. I don't care. They can sell their multi-million-dollar Virginia houses, for $12 or whatever it is. They can sell them for a string of beads and whatever it is that boomers paid back in the day, and us Gen Xers, millennials, and Zoomers can pick it up for almost nothing, like they should be right now anyway. I mean, frankly, all that stuff should be collapsing. Today's Christians worship. Yeah, it does seem that way. It does seem that way, and I don't think it's the Christian. I really think it's the churches. Again, as an atheist, I'm on the outside of this looking in. But if I were just giving you my opinion, it seems to me like there's a lot more people that are concerned about keeping the idea of Christianity alive as opposed to teaching the ideals that Christ once taught, which, and again, like I said, I mean, I have no problem with the stuff that he taught, particularly when it comes to finances. People don't give Christ the credit that he deserves as an economist. I mean, if you understand, he understood the whole money issue. He understood the money changer issue. That's a big deal. He understood the idea that what the Roman Empire was doing was diluting the currency, and then having the temple the people who work at the temple, I don't care, the priest class at the time, right? Tell people, oh yeah, turn in your coin, here. Well, yes, the coin that actually had gold in it, and then we're going to give you these new coins. Well, yeah, in other words, all you were doing is devaluing the currency, because back then they didn't have the ability to just digitally enter it and destroy the currency like they do now. No, they actually had to go and mint coin. And that's what was going on. And Christ knew that, and he told everybody, and they got really upset. And of course, we all know how that ended. Generally speaking, when somebody messes with the system, not just the system, but their money, they usually retort, fairly violently. It's just how it works. Strange that we look at costs going up rather than the dollar losing value. Yeah. It's because people are trained that way. People are trained to think of the dollar as a unit of measurement. The dollar is not a unit of measurement. The dollar is a garbage currency conjured from nothing. It is not a unit of measurement. There you have. Do you think Bitcoin will ever go to zero? Nope. I think those days are past. I think it's probably 10 times more likely to go to 1 million now than before it would ever go to zero. I think that at this point now, after crossing the 90 threshold, I'm not predicting this. Do not take this as a prediction. I'm just telling you my opinion. I think that you have a better chance of orange internet money going to 100,000 than you do to even see it go down to 75 again. Maybe. Are you anti-capitalism? What does capitalism even mean? And I'm not asking that in a rude way. I'm actually asking genuinely, because generally speaking, and I covered this a few videos ago, if it ends in the word ism, not all the time, but in most cases, if it ends in the word ism, capitalism, socialism, national socialism, fascism, racism, any of these isms, they're usually just a system of control. It's just a way to control people. Okay, anything, if it ends in ism, it's an idiom. And if it ends in the word ism, right, generally speaking, it is just a system of trying to control. It's a system of management. It is not an economic system. Capitalism is not an economic system. An economic system doesn't actually need to have a thought process. An economic system is just you and I engaged in commerce, right? Remember, all an economy is people. So you don't need to have an economic system. The system is just, you need to have math. You need to have an accurate unit of monetary measurement. The economy will figure it out. The average person will figure it out very quickly if the numbers stop changing, right? Once you nail down a currency that becomes a accurate unit of monetary measurement that does not change, right? Then people figure it out very quickly. They don't need to have any of the isms come in and say, well, we need to do this or do that, and we need to have, elect this board of people to, the Council of Elders, yada yada. But generally, whenever someone says, am I for capitalism or socialism or communism or national socialism, I don't believe really any of those isms work long term. Any of the isms, I don't see how they actually function in any kind of really solid way for the average human being on planet Earth. Forget the U.S. at that point, just generally across the globe. So, because there's plenty of people, for example, the idea is like, well, okay, what about communism? Communism is responsible for unaliving hundreds of millions of people, right? Just 100 million or so, 90 to 100 million or so in China alone, right? Under Mao, and most of them were small business owners, no different than the kulaks in Russia. So, it's because, remember, small business is the bane of government existence. It is, and the reason it's the bane of government existence because it's also the bane of large anything, right? Because this is, whether you're upset at, not you specifically, but whether someone is upset at oh my God, it's late stage capitalism, which is the thing that keeps getting uttered around everybody wants to sound intelligent on the internet. Okay, you can be upset at the giant mega corporations, but there's also the giant government, and both of them are a problem. And both of them, what do they both have in common? Central banking, loaning them both money. That's you got to go to the top of the pyramid. Okay, those are just the two stones right below it. Those are not big government and big corporations. They're both guilty of propping up big banking. And as soon as you get big banking out of the way, and the only way to get rid of big banking is to either, number one, let them collapse, or force the collapse by demanding hard currency. As soon as you demand hard currency, banking stops. Let's see here. 0. How do you propose we fix monetary system? Well, again, unit of monetary measurement. Very first video I ever did, way back on YT. You can look it up. It's called the primer video. And it was a long time ago. And I actually had my hair combed at the time. And I pointed out that yeah, I mean, when you change the monetary system, you don't need to change it to a different system. You just need to have an accurate unit of measurement. If you and I are building a house, whoever, let's say all of us, however many people are watching, we are all building houses or something. We want to have the same unit of measurement. If we're going to use, inch, SAE and inch pattern, then we need to actually stick with that. We can't have guys using cubits. We can't have guys using the metric system and then using some other, we just can't do that, right? We can't have another guy using, it's a span. Or, how tall is that roof? Well, 27 hands. We can't have that. It has to be, it has to be a consistent unit of measurement in order to actually have the houses look good. XRP, I don't know enough about it, sorry. User requires increasing lending and spending guarantees bank. Yeah, it does. You're right. You're not wrong about any of this. That's the problem, of course, when you start getting into the idea of hypothecating currency from nothing. When you start hypothecating currency, you create inflation just by creating more and more currency and shove it into the marketplace, which shoves prices up, which means that people need to borrow even more money, which means it gets worse. It's a death spiral. Or it's a debt spiral. It just goes out of control, and that's exactly what happens. So no, you're not right. You're not wrong on that. You studied Weimar Republic and its currency collapse. So yes and no. Right now it'll be a little different situation. So in the case of Weimar, it was because they owed a bunch of reparations, and the reparations, by the way, for most people who don't know this, you can look this up. They wanted gold only. They only wanted gold in reparations. I wonder why that is. Well, because they seized all the gold and then said, yeah, you need to pay all this back with gold as well. And if you don't have any gold and you don't have any way to get gold, well, because Germany's landlocked. So yeah, how do you go about doing that? It means you have to buy gold from somewhere else. And if you're having to buy gold, well, then what you're doing is and if you don't have any money, you end up siphoning all of the resources out of a country if they have to try and buy gold. This is exactly what would happen, just so you know, for all of you out there, if you want to completely destroy every mega corporation that's out there. I'm not kidding about this, for all my leftists out there. If you really want to bring down the man, if you really want to do that, you get every employee to demand to be paid in any hard currency. I don't care what hard currency you pick. Gold, orange internet money, doesn't matter. A hard currency, any hard currency that can't be counterfeited from nothing, and say, hey, listen, I'm not lifting a finger. I'm not moving one more, I'm not toting one more barge or lifting one more bale until you are paying me in some kind of hard currency. It will siphon all of the resources out of even the biggest companies. The biggest companies will be gone in less than a year. That includes Apple, Google, all of them. In fact, those will go really fast because they have no actual assets to sell. Most of them, it's all based on projected stock price. So they don't really have any, the book value of most of these companies is nothing. And this is one of the reasons why you see Buffett sitting on the sideline, because the breakup value, what's called book value of most companies, is nothing. They have nothing. They have nothing to offer. There's nothing to sell off. And even if you did, the first people, in theory, who are supposed to be covered are the bondholders, right? The people who lent money. They're the ones who get, and then the, or your employees, the bondholders and stuff. And it goes in order like that. Shareholders are a distant bottom of the stack, right? That's when your shareholders get paid. It's supposed to be, okay? In 2008, when we bailed everybody out, it was because it was all about protecting the shareholders. Should not have been, but that's the case. So that would be, a good way of looking at that. Anybody else have new white icon? The game will change to remove capital gains tax. It might. I don't know why anybody's bothering to pay capital gains taxes, and not at this point. I mean, like, yeah, I mean, especially on crypto. I don't know why anybody is paying taxes on that. Personally, I mean, there you go. Real estate bubble. Worse you think? My apartment complex have. Yeah, I mean, that's just it. Most of these things are getting bailed out. That's the other part of mass deportations. Somebody who asked about the idea of mass deportations. What are the ramifications of that? Well, one of the things that can also be a big problem is what if you're a mega landlord? Okay, and we're not talking about landlords who have like 2 or 3 rental properties. We're not talking about those guys. We're talking about the mega landlords, the guys who have like 10,000 doors. Okay, or 20,000 doors, or 50,000 doors. For those of you who don't know, a door just means a unit. Whether it's a house or an apartment, doesn't make a difference. That's what they call it. So if you've got 10 or 20,000 doors, 20,000 units, right, that are renting, and let's say that maybe 20% of those are, 25% of those are people that are going to be deported, well, there goes all of your income, right? Because most landlords nowadays are riding these razor thin margins when they buy these properties or when they get into them, especially and I've talked about that a bunch of times, but you've got a bunch of people that pay way too much for these properties, way too much. They're crazy on what they pay, and they have just this tiny margin that they've just got nothing left. And when that happens, those poor folks are going to get wiped out. Yeah, I mean, if that actually happened, yeah, you'd see commercial real estate, rental real estate, all of these things would start collapsing. And again, as I've said, the dollar and all of this other stuff collapsing would be probably the best thing that can happen to the U.S. since Cornwallis surrendered, and that's not an exaggeration on my part anyway. But yeah, they're empty buildings everywhere. Will Doge actually bring efficiency? I doubt it. Considering that they're hiring a bunch of people, I couldn't believe it. Considering that they're actually hiring a bunch of people, I have to wonder how much they'll do. That'll do, Big Kitty. Thank you. Just found you live. Please, where are you? LMK, where you are actively for. I don't know what. I'm sorry. Window brightness. I don't know what that means. Sorry. Axel. Yep, that's me. In the U.S., there are 24 million workers, 12 million manufacturing workers. Yeah, that's what I mean. I mean, you've got 2 bureaucrats for every one actual productive person. That's not even close to sustainable. Oh, and by the way, most of those bureaucrats are paid, in some cases, 2 to 3 times what their counterparts in the private sector could earn. And on top of that, they also have these ridiculous pensions, these absurd pensions. Go to usdebtclock.org. I mean, for anybody out there, if you just want to look something up for fun, usdebtclock.org, and you can look at all the numbers right there. And at the very bottom on the right, you'll see what's called the unfunded liabilities. Unfunded liabilities in the U.S. is something like 220 million? No, excuse me, $220 trillion. I was way off. I was off by several $100 billion. Anyway, yeah, it's like $220 trillion, and that's just the unfunded liabilities. That's in addition to the $36 trillion of national debt. And if those are by the way, and in my opinion also, if those are the numbers they're willing to admit to, what are the real numbers? Because we all know there's the so-called the off-budget, items. So what's the real number? It's probably twice that. I mean, dude. This man's my spirit animal. I do my best. You're the tiger. They didn't even read the Bible. Yeah, if you're referring to my commentary on a lot of churches, yeah, I think that a lot of them have some problems that way. Money changers, yep. Did I lose everybody? I hope not. Lose by a little spot here. XRP price double last year. Yeah, it probably did. I don't know. Let's move this little puzzle piece over. For whatever reason, TikTok has me move this little puzzle piece over after a certain amount of time. I'm guessing they just want to make sure that there's somebody still still here. Small-time landlords are no less objectionable. Well, I didn't say that they're not objectionable. I'm just pointing out that they're the least of the concern. The bigger ones are the bigger problem for the time being, as their price, if their prices were to collapse to, let's say, about $350 a month for a one-bedroom, which is, so when I was a kid, right, let me go define that. That'd be I guess the 90s, right? Okay, so during the 90s, a one-bedroom apartment was in Seattle, where I grew up, was about $350, $400 a month. Seriously, that's how much it was. And that's in Seattle, by the way, in the 90s. That's ground zero for the 90s, okay? And yeah, I mean, it was $350, I remember a two-bedroom apartment, I paid $385, right, when I was 17. So yeah, if prices come down to that point, then yes, all of these tiny landlords, these tiny rent seekers that paid $690,000 for a 322 house, that they're trying to get $3,900 a month out of in rent, and now they're competing with $300 and some odd a month rent. They will either have to, they would in theory have to either lower their rents down to a more reasonable rate, which would be about $550 a month, which would be about right. I didn't stutter, landlords. I mean, I know there's a couple of landlords that follow me on the sly from alt accounts, because they know my analysis is very good, and it is. My analysis is awesome. They don't like me personally, but they like the analysis, and I'm okay with that. But either that, or they drop the keys off to the house to the bank and say, you know what, this is your problem. Goodbye. I can't cover this anymore, and that could happen. Supply demand. Yeah, if supply and demand levels do level out, then you find actual price discovery, which is what you want. That's actually what you're after, is honest price discovery. Honest price discovery generally, especially in a hard currency environment, means prices start going down. It takes enormous amounts of effort to get prices to keep going up. I remember they aren't getting paid. 80-hour Genesis volunteer. Is it volunteers? Is that what it is? Okay, interesting. They're already killing the poor with toxic food. Yeah, they are. Yeah, I mean, that's just seems that way. Certainly seems that way. What do you think about using an underwriter? What do you think about using an underwriter to get funding and building credit with an S corp? It's a little more difficult now than it was back in the day to do stuff like that, to pull that off. It can be done, but it's a little harder to get the banks to take that stuff seriously anymore. Back when there was a lot more competition in banking, so I mean, like, I don't know if you guys know this or not, but let me give you, if you don't know this, I'll give you some inside baseball on this. Look at who are the credit card issuers in this country. It's about 6 or 7. That's about it. There's like 6 or 7 credit card issuers, and now other people will put their names on them. They'll brand them. They'll kind of white label the credit cards, but the actual issuers are Citibank, Chase, all the usual suspects. They're the ones who are pretty much underwriting all those cards. And when you kind of look at it that way, there's very few credit issuers now. So it's getting a lot harder. Back in the day, so this is the problem that, like, the boomers, a lot of boomers don't understand this stuff. That back when when Wang Chung was in the top 40, and Top Gun was in theaters, the boomers, a boomer could just go, a 26, 27-year-old boomer could just go down to the local bank, and they would just say, yeah, no problem. You want to buy this house? This $43,000 house, we'll loan it to you. Do you have a down payment of $2,000? And they would do that, right? What boomers didn't understand is that there were hundreds, millions of banks back then, independent banks, that had like 1 or 2 locations. That doesn't exist anymore. In fact, most of the small banks, what you think of as small banks, if you go in and actually talk to them, and if you talk to the president of that bank, assuming there's still one there that's willing to talk to you, they'll say, yeah, we just got bought out by ABC Giant Bank. We're keeping our name, though, so that way customers know in other words, they're owned by BlackRock, right? They're owned by BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street. It doesn't make any difference what name is on the side of the building. They're all pretty much owned by the same people. So that means it's the same credit issuers, which means it's getting much harder for people to do that kind of stuff now. They're tightening up the credit. When they say tightening credit, it's like, oh, they're tightening lending standards. No, it's not lending standards. It's who they're willing to lend to. And I do mean who, not a credit profile. That means nothing anymore. Credit score means nothing anymore. It really doesn't. I have had an 809 mortgage beacon. I've also had a 400 beacon. I've noticed no difference in anything. They lend money to whoever they want to. That's the reality, okay? If you went to the right school, you hung out with the right guy, you married the right person, like, dude, then yeah, no problem at all. You can get lending. That is not the case with anything else, as evidenced by, for example, going back to our original topic when I brought up the idea of IQ, for instance, right? Does IQ matter? No, it matters to what family you're born. That's how it works. So yeah, they lend money to whoever they want to, and that's just it. I mean, if you're not on the list, well, then you're not on the list, right? I mean, it's like trying to get into an after hours club. Are you on the list? Are you on the list? Ever been compared to Coach Red Pill? I don't know who that is. I'm sorry. I don't get out much. I'm usually touching too much grass. Lawn, TikTok, lawn. That's not a metaphor. Tariffs then. Okay, so this is an odd question to me. As I've answered in the past, I will, if it comes to between the choice between an income tax versus tariffs, I would take tariffs, absolutely, because people who manufacture things here in the U.S., everybody has this vision of, well, but the big companies, stop. Why don't you own a machine shop? Why don't you own a 40 by 60 pole building that you put your own CNC machines in there and start making stuff? How come you don't do that? Yeah, that's the problem. You're supposed to do that, right? You're not supposed, like, this idea of go work for a company, that has got to stop. That it has been the bane of my existence since I was like in 3rd grade. That has got to stop. This whole idea of go try and find a company. Dude, most of these companies are not worth working for. I mean, we've all seen the videos. I mean, maybe recently you haven't, but look them up. Look up these videos of truck drivers, for example. I'm just using it's something I know, right? You look up truck drivers, these company drivers who have got these reverse-facing cameras. So they're driving the truck and they have a camera on them the whole time, and the camera is 24/7 nonstop, and audio. But I mean, imagine, right? Imagine. So you've got full video and audio, 4K definition, and everything you do. I mean, you so much as scratch your nose, it's on camera. You do one of these things like this, and as I understand, Amazon, right? I mean, as I understand this is the story I guess. You get people that get like email fired because they scratched their ear and the system thought they were on the phone. Yeah, that has to stop, and the only way that stops is, number one, stop letting them bring in a bunch of people to work for their company. And then let the free market deal with that. In other words, people say, I'm no longer working for you, and if you're going to put me under those kind of conditions, I want 10 times the money. If you want me to do that, you want me to not only drive the truck and deliver the packages, but you also want me to entertain you on top of that. Okay, well, that's extra. The driving the truck kind of thing, that's $35 an hour. The entertain you on top of that, that's $350 an hour, right? I mean, what does Dave Chappelle charge for his show? Actually, Kevin Hart charges more. How much does Kevin Hart charge for his show? It's a lot, right? So if you want me to entertain you while I'm driving this truck and delivering packages, well, then you're going to give me a lot more money, right? Well, as soon as people do that, then these companies start getting realistic. They start pulling all the crap out of the truck. They stop doing all that, and they're like, oh, no, hey, come work for us, and we'll just leave you alone. Yeah, that's how it's supposed to work. So yeah, as far as tariffs are concerned, yeah, I mean, I would take those over income taxes, because then income tax you can't really escape unless you're me, then you just do whatever you want to do and stuff, and then you just don't care. But just keep in mind, if you're going to become a criminal, you need to make sure that guys, pay attention. If you're going to become a criminal, right, then you need to marry well. What that means is you cannot marry women who buy you full-length chinchilla coats. You cannot spend $50,000 on Super Bowl tickets, right? No. You got to stop that. You cannot do any of that nonsense. What are you proposing as a currency? Any hard currency. Any hard currency. And I say that seriously. Do I think that there are certain currencies that are better? Yeah, I do. But any hard currency, because the reason I say that is because any hard currency is better than what we have. Any hard currency, I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's gold, orange internet money, or some hybrid of the two, or silver, copper bullion. I mean, giant blocks of copper. I don't care what you pick. It just has to be something that isn't conjured from nothing, and that's how you have to do that for the time being. And then eventually what happens is the market starts to whittle itself down. What is the market? It's just people. It's the same as an economy. The answer is the same. It's the same as an economy. It's just people, right? So when the people decide that they want to have, I want to have portability and I want to have this and I want to have that. Okay, then what they start doing is the market starts looking for a solution to that. The market naturally starts to look for a solution. It's a very healthy thing. It's something we haven't done in a long time. In this world, not just the US, the world has not done this enough. I hope that people do find these videos and they do actually translate them into other languages. Be careful. I use a lot of slang and what have you. But I mean, try to get accurate translation if you do that, please. Let's see here. Paid by APA. Yeah, no kidding. That absolutely has to stop. And I would say that about any organization. I don't care what country they're from. I would say any organization. If you're involving yourself and if you're from another country and you're paying a bunch of politicians in the U.S., no. That should be a red flag for anybody. I don't care what party you're with. I don't care what your politics are. I don't none of that. That should be an automatic red flag for all Americans. Categorically, you should not be wanting other countries involved in that. That's just ridiculous. It's sort of like that. All those celebrity douchebags that threatened to leave the country. Why have you not left? And I don't mean why haven't you left now, but why didn't you leave 10 years ago? These people actually have the money to leave and go anywhere they want to go. And they have the type of business model, where they get royalties and what have you. They literally can live anywhere else. Why would you stay here in a country that apparently, hates you or that you don't like? I mean, it's just ridiculous to me. No, you should have left a long time ago. Unionize, go right ahead and unionize. The challenge that happens with unions is that usually they start getting influenced by the union as opposed to by, the collective bargaining that exists inside the company, right? So if you look up J. Paul Getty wrote a book called How to Be Rich. I read it a long time ago. I read it when I was like 15. And in that book, he actually talks about unions. And he points out that if union is free and fair, and it's actually by the company, the people that are in the company, that's just being prudent. That's just being, respectful of his time as the owner, where one representative comes in and negotiates collectively for everybody. That's just a good use of your time. You wouldn't want to have 10,000 people coming into your office to try and negotiate with you. I say this as an owner. Imagine, put yourself in that position. Like, would you want 10,000 people trying to negotiate on individual, oh my God, no. No, you can collectively bargain, and that's fine, but it has to be free and fair. It has to be also understand that the company does have to make a profit, right? But you could still demand there's a balancing act, and you have to have both. And at least Getty understood that. He actually did respect that. Nugent for ATF. I don't know. We'll see what happens with Ted. I don't. They are not going to get rid of the NFA. For my pew guys, I hate that I have to sound like a 3-year-old when I say this kind of stuff, but yeah, I mean for my guys that are really into the 2A kind of thing, they're not going to get rid of the NFA. They should. ATF should be abolished. It's a completely unconstitutional agency on its face. If somebody were to actually challenge, and assuming the Supreme Court would actually hear the case, and they will not, I promise you, ATF is a completely unconstitutional agency. It shouldn't even exist. It shouldn't exist. I mean, how many people are smoking now? The smoking numbers are dwindling, right? Everybody's vaping now. Alcohol consumption is down overall. Who can afford it? My God, man. So no, I mean, that's just kind of how it works. All supple to buy. If you got $1 million, what would you buy? Me, personally? Probably not a lot. There's not a lot of things that I really want. There's frankly not a lot that anybody could really give me that I would particularly want anymore, in this world. But it would be probably a property. I would probably buy let me be clear on this, a single property to live on, not rental. I don't care about rental properties. That stuff that is low frequency crap to me. But no, I probably would actually buy a small. It wouldn't cost anywhere near that kind of money, and then probably just build something. And of course, being who I am, I would build it myself more than likely. I'd probably actually set up a separate TikTok account of me just building a house, or actually multiple structures on that property. That's probably what I'd end up doing. At heart, I'm a builder. That's kind of what I do. If left to my own devices and have the time available, I just build stuff. My rent is $400 a month. Yeah, that's reasonable. $1,200 a month rent average. Yeah, that's what I mean. That's just seems high to me given the circumstances. Let's see here. Yeah, and by the way, and that's in North Dakota. So when you go to other parts of the country, you guys all know this stuff. You go to other parts of the country. You go into Southern California. Rent can be $4,000, $5,000 a month, easy. And that's just for a little 1,200 square foot box. What source of information do you observe routinely to help with your opinions? Well, my opinions are actually developed over a lifetime, over the last half century. So my opinions have been developed over that. And sources of information, anymore nowadays, it's getting difficult to find sources of any kind of information. Search engines aren't worth anything now. They're just basically advertising bots. If you try to search anything, you're just going to get a bot. You're just going to get something like that. So search engines haven't been worth anything for the last 10 years as far as every now and again it gets it right. Every now and again, Wikipedia gets it right occasionally. But most of the time, it doesn't. It's just kind of whatever propaganda somebody wants to put in there. Unless somebody wants to troll Wikipedia, which, like as juvenile delinquents and stuff. And I admit to nothing. I admit to not anything, but it is hilarious to see some trolls on Wikipedia periodically. It's getting difficult to find good, reliable sources. You really have to just pay attention. And kind of read the sort of like how I do it is I sort of read a vibe. I don't mean read consensus. The internet rewards consensus. Let's be real here. Let's be honest about how the internet actually works. The internet rewards consensus. The internet rewards, whoever. It's like a popularity contest constantly. That's the internet, right? And the most popular people, usually, not always, but usually, are going to be either driving a specific narrative or avoiding a narrative, right? Okay, that's sort of, I'm not going to say any names at all. I refuse to say any names, but there are some people that are very good at it, right? They're very good at avoiding a topic, and and unfortunately they won't be as overt about it. So, like in my case, I won't avoid any topic at all. I'll talk about a topic depending upon the platform and whether or not the platform will allow it. Now, if you're just, if we're just, you're just in my garage hanging out, help me fix something or something like that. There isn't a topic that I won't talk about, but you end up getting limited based on the platforms, because it's why I don't consider social media a business model. Okay, because as soon as you say something that's outside of the narrative, then then the platform gets rid of you because you said something outside of the narrative. So as far as trying to find good sources of information, it really just comes down to paying attention and just sort of watching, what's going on. I will say this. It has been somewhat helpful, that whole community notes thing on the other platform, formerly known as Birdsite. That's somewhat helpful, kind of. Because in some cases, it's nice to be able to get context that sometimes is missing from a news story. You know how this stuff is. All of you know how this is. You all know how this is. You read a news story and you get the feeling that you're reading something like, man, there's something missing. There's something missing from this whole news article. And it turns out that it's usually missing a whole bunch of context that goes with that. And you're like, oh, okay, that definitely changes the way that comes across. So I don't have any particular spaces that I go to for that type of information. And as far as my opinions, they've been developed over the course of a very long period of time. And I've developed my own data points along the way. And usually it comes from just questioning, is this real, or is this the real life, or is this just fantasy? I'm not trying to make light of that. I'm just, 1600. Yeah, 1600. That's just see, and those numbers just seem crazy to me, right? Especially, I mean, put yourself in a position of being like a young person who's like 22, trying to like, or 19, trying to pay these ridiculous rents, and nobody wants to pay any more than $12 an hour. It's like it's just crazy. What would you take on starting a business during the coming? What would my take on starting a business? What kind of business, I guess, would be the way I would ask that. Like, what type of business are you wanting to start? And then, of course, how do you intend on putting your foundation together for your business? Meaning, are you talking about owning the property and then building a building and putting a business in there? I mean, like, there's a lot of factors there. So if you could dial that in a little bit, I can maybe help out a little bit. We'll see what I can do. No promises, but I'll see what I can do. But overall, I think that business is not a bad idea. Had $1 million, what would you buy? I already went through that. I would buy, like I said, I would probably buy a place to live in. And frankly, the rest of the money after paying for something like that would go into my off the internet, orange internet money wallet. Frankly, that is what would happen. Member of the 1099. Yep. 1099 employees. Exactly. It does help, and it just makes the taxes go away for the most part. Let's see here. Oh, no, I lost everybody again. Here we go. Now we are. I think I found everybody. BTC or gold? What would I prefer? I like both. I like the portability of Bitcoin. I also tend to like the idea that in terms of the amount of wealth that you can smuggle, I mean, there's no contest on this one. Gold is more fungible. That's true. But in terms of the amount of wealth that you can carry on your person, it's virtually limitless in the case of orange internet money versus gold. Gold is not limitless. You are limited to the size of your prison pocket. Let's see here. Hold on. I lost everybody again. Would you ever write a book on this subject? I don't think anybody would ever read it, frankly. I don't mean that in a mean way. I just don't think anybody would ever read something like this. I would write fiction. If I wrote anything at all, it would be fiction. It would be fictional stories that I would tell all the same stuff, but it would be cloaked in a fictional narrative that would actually be a bit more inviting to a larger group of people. Now, as to whether anybody could read through subtext, I see the statistics. What is it? 54%. I just saw this the other day. 54% of American adults are illiterate, or not illiterate, excuse me. They have a sixth grade reading level or below. So that eliminates writing any kind of like really exotic stuff. Do you think the car market could collapse? I don't think so. Not because of oversupply, but because again, it's just going to come down to lending. Same thing with with any lend. Like if you look at the Rally Fighter, which is a great car. It's one of my favorites actually. You can look up the Rally Fighter. Rally Fighter was made by a company called Local Motors in Arizona, and they stopped selling them. They went out of business. They closed their doors. Why? It wasn't because the car wasn't cool, and it wasn't because people didn't want it. Dude, lots of guys wanted that car, and people thought it was super cool. It's they couldn't get it financed. The car market is driven by who's willing to write the notes. That's it. And as long as banks are willing to write the notes for these ridiculous interest rates and so on, the car market is going to keep right on going. They don't even care. I don't think that anybody cares. I think they'll pretty much write any paper out there now. I know that when I went to buy a car, I told the story I think 2 weeks ago. When I went to go buy a car, I went and I was going to just pay cash. I was going to write a check, and the guy all but begged me on bended knee to finance it. And I'm like, I don't want to finance it. I'm going to write you a check. And I'm not kidding. They even brought the manager out who, same thing, all but on bended knee begged me to finance that car. That's the level of what's going on. So we'll see. more like manufacturing company processing textile. I'd like to see more textiles made here. I really would. I mean, we have the facilities to do that. We have. It's not like we don't have the acreage to build all these facilities. There's plenty of acreage. There's plenty of space in the U.S. The only people who said there's no space in the U.S. are people who don't get out much. You know, I mean, dude, between LA and New York is not a lot of stuff out there. So there's plenty of space, particularly in Texas. I'm in Texas, and dude, Texas has a lot of space. It's a big state. Let's see here. Pretty easy. Carry seat. Huh? Yeah, seed phrase. There we go. I'm going to say hi. I appreciate a unique point of view. I hope we will figure out how much enough is. I do too. I'd like to see it. Where am I at here? Hang loose. Where am I at on my time? Yeah, I'm coming. I got about another 10 minutes. 10 minutes, and then I got to go. I got a bunch of other stuff that I'm going to go do. Most of which is going to go play with the big puppy, my dog. Would you move to live in the Middle East instead of staying in the U.S. for a better quality of life? It depends greatly. If you're asking me personally, right? So let's say that, for example, you live in that country and you're saying, hey, would you come live here? And so it would really depend on the terms that the country was offering, frankly, because I know that like countries like Russia, and I'm not criticizing Russia. Russia's a beautiful country. I've met several Russians. They're wonderful people. But Russia has some pretty strict rules about living there, and you're not a Russian, right? You know, you have to learn to speak Russian, that's all part of what we should be doing here, actually. We should be telling people need to learn English. But it would really greatly depend on the terms and conditions set forth, like, okay, you know, hey, if I'm moving someplace, do I get to own this land? Like for real own it? Not this fake nonsense ownership thing where you kind of own it, but you really don't. No, do I get to own it? Like for real. And then do I, you know, what are the laws? What am I agreeing to with these crazy laws? Because, you know, a lot of countries have like weird laws, right? I mean, so for example, Singapore is very beautiful, and it's a beautiful country. I've seen pictures, I've seen videos. It looks gorgeous there. I would not want to deal with the terms and conditions that are set forth with living in Singapore. I would seriously. I mean, if you're terrified to do anything outside of a narrative that somebody's driving, I don't know that I could do that. I mean, you just think of how freely I speak, and that's on TikTok Live. Now imagine what I say when I'm not on TikTok Live. You've seen my other videos. You guys have seen, I'm pretty uncensored, you know, and I tone it, by the way, I tone it down for all of this stuff, dude. I am really a very disagreeable human being in person. Trust me. And that's just take my word for it, okay? There's a reason people like avoid me, okay? What do you haul? Equipment predominantly. Equipment. In fact, actually, I got to go to a tire store in Central Texas actually this week to pick up 10 new tires. That's expensive. For those of you in the trucking industry, you know how expensive that can actually be. But yeah, I generally equipment or any flatbed general goods, because I pull a step deck. So I pull a 48-102 step deck. Where's the best place to live in the United States? I don't know. I mean, I chose South Texas personally, but it's an opinion of mine, and it was an area that I actually really kind of liked. I kind of fell in love with it down here. It's a nice area. Now, it's not my commercial. I don't get any money from Houston to say that, and I don't even live in Houston. I live north of Houston, but yeah, it's like after watching your videos, I think Dubai would be perfect. Possibly. Though Dubai, I don't know is there any farming in Dubai? You know, I don't mean like Bitcoin farming. I mean like actual like agriculture. I don't know if there is any. I've been wanting to go back into agriculture for some time now. I'm a farmer, and I am a carpenter and shepherd at heart, and that's what I would much rather go back to do. And it is a free market. I agree. And by the way, I've seen pictures of Dubai. It's beautiful. What's up with all the empty buildings, though? You know, like it just seems weird to me that they would just build all those buildings and there's like nobody in them. You know, Conestoga, I do not, actually. I go back and forth. Depends on the day you ask me. Okay, so my trucking guys that are like heavy into trucking, it depends on the day you ask me. If it's raining out and it's horrible conditions and I've got to tarp something that is 6 feet tall or 8 feet tall and I've got to climb all over the place and I'm going to spend the next hour and a half being soaked in, or out in the or worse, up in like Illinois, I'm in Chicago and it's negative 26 degrees outside. And I've got a tarp, I've got to strap down and tarp a bunch of steel out of like EMJ or something like that. And I'm going to be out there for 2 hours. Yeah, then I want to run a Conestoga. Then I want to buy a Conestoga. Absolutely. Then I was like, okay, well, how much are those Conestogas? 25 grand. I have to put in my trailer. My trailer's old. Do I want to get another trailer? And in the summertime and other times when I don't carry a lot of tarped goods, it's just equipment, I don't really care. I look at it, I do like being able to see across the back deck and not have to worry about anything. I can look right at my mirrors and I can see like pretty much directly behind me. Plus I have a back window in my truck, so I can actually do the head turn and look out behind the sleeper and stuff. Not that I do that very often, but I do it when I do backing. If there's nothing on the deck, I'll actually do the regular driver thing where you blindside in because you can see out the back window. I want to add. Hold on. I used to live in Toronto. It's unbearable. What's going on? It's pretty cold there too. That's the other problem that I have with it. I've become very acclimated to the idea of warm weather myself. Opinion on wedding licensing. You mean like a marriage license? I'd like to see the government get out of it, frankly, out of all of that. I'd like to see people actually go back to just common sense and like realize, it's probably not a good idea to marry your cousin. You probably shouldn't do that. It is not a sustainable reproductive practice. But back in the day, that's one of the reasons they would do stuff like this. One of the reasons they gave that was like, you didn't want to have people doing like, what do they call that? Incest marriages and so on. You didn't want to have some of that. But now, I don't know. I heard Conestogas to run onions. Yeah, onions need to, if you're tarping them. I've taken a couple of loads of onions in the past, but it was never with tarps, and it was only a short distance, so they didn't need tarps. So the weather was nice. And then get one more question. Millennial failure. I feel our generation is lost. I don't know what you mean by lost. Millennials actually. It depends on what you mean by lost. It really does, in my view. As a Gen Xer, as a younger Xer, I tend to identify a bit more with millennials than I do probably some of the older Xers, because a lot of the older Gen Xers are a little closer to the boomers in terms of their overall lifestyle, and some of their opinions that kind of tend to swing boomer-ish, right? In my case, I tend to side a bit more with the millennials, only because I've watched this in the blue collar world and I've seen what's happened. I've seen the lack of options, not the choices that millennials have, the lack of options they have. Big difference. Should I go to oil fields and haul? Dude, if you can actually get a gig where you're hauling oil. Right. If you get a company that'll actually, assuming you have tanker experience, I'm guessing, but if you've got tanker experience and you've got a company that's willing to hire you to haul, especially water, because water's not even hazmat, so you don't need a hazmat endorsement or anything, and you're just going to haul water. If you could pull that off, man, especially if it's decent money, I'd take it. It just depends on the. For me, it depends on working conditions. Like that's sort of my gauge on that. Is like, okay, is the working condition. Is it like a day cab, for example? And if it's a day cab, okay, fine. Am I going to be sitting someplace for long periods of time? Because if I'm going to sit there for 10 hours, I want a sleeper because I'm just going to go back and read or something like that, right? So for me, I kind of gauge it with working conditions. At least that's how I do it. I'm not telling you how to do it. I'm just saying that's how I do stuff like that. So I can't actually, but yeah, depending on the situation, if you can actually get a gig where you're hauling water or something, may not be too bad a deal, especially if you're single or something, or if you live out in that area. Like if you live out in Midland or Odessa or something like that. Yeah, absolutely. Is it over for us, the 30-year-olds? feeling like we didn't. Well, I mean, it's like I said, it's been tough. It's been brutal what's happened. This is one of the I don't think that's ever happened in human history where you've actually had a generation of people that have had it so good, like in terms of wealth. I mean, like this is, I don't want to make this just the bash boomer hour, but look, the boomers had a level of wealth that one has to stand in awe of. Like, it's unbelievable just how much wealth boomers had. Like, we all know that. We all know that. I mean, like, most of us, even out here who have full-time jobs, who are professionally employed, right, and who do, like, who do actually make okay money, still don't even have half the lifestyle boomers had for the same kind of money. Even, in fact, I told the story a while back, but even, like, I remember this boomer guy, this proto-boomer, right? I mean, it was like borderline silent gen. But, I remember he talked about his, getting his first job in, like, 1979, and his retirement salary, even if you paid a millennial his retirement salary today of $160,000 a year, they still couldn't live on that in the area that he was in. Like, you couldn't even make it work even at the peak salary. Like, it's nuts. Again, if you're going to go there to the oil fields with your CDL, then I would say just grill the company and make sure that they're not going to hose you. Boomer by 3 months, yeah, no kidding, huh? Let's see here. Two completely different generations. Yeah, I know. It's hopefully it comes back. Like I said, I'd like to see everything. If the markets were just allowed to correct, then a lot of this stuff fixes itself very quickly. The question is, will the markets be allowed to correct? Time will tell. We'll see what happens with the incoming administration. I'm not very hopeful. I mean, if you've read any of my articles on it, I'm not terribly hopeful, but we'll see what happens. Hey, maybe they do allow the markets to correct. Maybe they do come in and just say, okay, we're just going to let the markets correct. If the stock market goes, if the Dow goes to 6,000, then so be it. Maybe they will. I doubt it, but I because I think that too many people have attached themselves to the idea of what the stock market performance is doing. So anyway, so I hope articles, they're on the site formerly known as Bird Site. Apparently on TikTok you can't say the name of other platforms. So but yeah, if you go there and you kind of look around and stuff and you scroll through long enough, you will eventually find those articles. There's a whole bunch of them. What administration? That would be the Orange Band administration. That'd be the Trump administration. The incoming, we'll see what they do. Guys, that's about all I have time. What time is it? Yeah, it's an hour and a half. So thank you all for coming and stuff. And then, maybe next Saturday, I haven't 100% decided stuff, but maybe next Saturday. If I do, it'll be 6 o'clock Central Time next Saturday. In the meantime, have a fantastic rest of the week, guys.